It's crazy what the longing for fame can do to an individual. It creates jealousy, greed, and envy. They long to become someone important, someone who is viewed higher than everyone else, someone who represents their whole outlook on what success and perfection is. My question is, how far is someone willing to go to achieve fame and acknowledgement? And is it really worth it? In 2011, I received an email from a man named Dwayne Richard regarding a documentary he needed edited. He shared a bit of the story and controversy behind the broad topic of classic video games, and to make it more specific, Pac-Man. Basically, he revealed to me how one man seeking fame and fortune greatly affects many people around him. The man I am referring to is the well-known Billy Mitchell, one of the stars in the so-called documentary, The King of Kong. A documentary Dwayne had mentioned that he was actually in. The King of Kong was the starting point for Dwayne to teach me all about Billy Mitchell. It turns out that the entire documentary was staged, and full of lies. Billy Mitchell, Walter Day, and Steve Wiebe were all in on it. The documentary itself is more of a fictional movie than anything, and one big political mess. They cut out key characters, such as Tim Serby.
Yeah, the guy you cheated out of the King of Kong, that's me. And I got the tape to prove it if any of the experts would like to watch it and, question its authenticity. Now that's what a lot of these producers didn't know. They didn't think that I had the foresight to do that when they were saying, well, his score is unverified, we can't verify his score. We just couldn't track this guy down, because they already had a secret agenda. But what they didn't know was I had already had a copy of that tape that I had sent to Twin Galaxies, because I'm sentimental like that. I mean, not many people at that time would have made themselves a copy of that, let alone kept it for 8 years, but I did, and we did watch it earlier.
He actually had the high score in Donkey Kong, but the producers covered his name up and only made the competition between the two popular guys, Billy Mitchell and Steve Wiebe. Seeing this controversy and all these lies really intrigued me.
It's like when I first watched it, I didn't know about any stuff Bill had said or anything, but I suspected that it was made up to a large degree. I had no idea how much of it was faked and all that. And then when I start asking Bill about it and other people, I find out a large portion of that movie is scripted. And I don't know, yeah, I guess it's hard to separate. I understand what you're saying. It's you're saying okay, I have inside knowledge.
Well, how many people can ask
Bill Mitchell?
It's hard
to separate that.
How many people get to ask Bill whether it's real or not?
Yeah.
So it should be obvious by now that Bill and Walter were in on this with the King of Kong, and there was no crafty editing. It was all part of the basic storyline that they had set up.
The score that was in the database for so long, 874,000. Right. Brace yourself for impact. That score on September 17th, year 2000, exactly 7 years before the release of King of Kong, that score was broken by a guy in New York by the name of Tim Serby. After Tim Serby broke the world record, I called him. We spoke on the phone. I congratulated him. He told me about himself, and I told him about myself, and we had one or two. I think we had two brief, relatively brief phone calls, and that was it.
Bill contacted you, and he told you that you were passed over for the King of Kong because you weren't popular or something like that. Did somebody?
Yeah, they were looking for personalities, to sell a story rather than to document facts.
We knew the underdog in the story through a friend of a friend, and he told us about the fact that he was going for the title. And what really piqued our interest was that one day he came home and found that two strangers were in his garage, had broken in, and were dissecting his machine, taking the board out, and seeing if it was a legitimate, original, standard issue 1981 machine.
So, about the break-in, basically. What happened was Steve Wiebe was there signing autographs and so on, and several people, actually, I would say half the people that were there were like, they would ask him questions about the King of Kong, and most people would just always end up talking about, man, I can't believe people just broke into your house and went through your games and stuff like that, if that would have happened to me, I would have done this and I would have done that. And I noticed that Steve didn't really even answer anything, he just kind of like laughed it off or something like that.
It's very sad to see how successful Seth Gordon became after creating the King of Kong. He exploited many players and a lot of people behind the scenes that the documentary doesn't even feature. And the crazy part is that he wouldn't have been able to exploit anyone without the help of Bill and Walter, who are known for already exploiting all their friends, everyone in the gaming community. It's very easy to see how Walter Day promotes Billy Mitchell to put him above the rest. In his quote, "It's not that anyone got a perfect Pac-Man, but that Billy Mitchell got a perfect Pac-Man."
I don't know.
That's the most painful thing. Like, it's in Twin Galaxy's best interest to promote Billy Mitchell and make him a superstar.
Right. It's not that like just anybody got a perfect score. It's that Billy Mitchell got a perfect score.
That's that's pretty funny. Well, yeah.
Right? I'm right though. Right?
Yeah, no, that's the story the world's been told, though, eh?
It became very clear to me who the villains really were. Walter Day and Billy Mitchell both ruined many people's lives, and now I can see why Dwayne wanted this story out there.
He doesn't want to do an interview with you, though, right?
No, he doesn't want. He told Rick he doesn't ever want to talk to me again.
Okay.
What that means is that Bill Mitchell has just knocked himself out of the box. That means that he doesn't count, and it's going to be us or whoever's left over who's going to be in this documentary.
It'll be a fresh point of view. I mean, it'll probably be more technically oriented than the other documentaries were. I mean, I haven't seen Chasing Ghosts yet, but I thought they were just powder puff pieces, and they didn't really get into the technical details. And what were the problems with these types of events? Nobody really would talk about that. They would just say, "Oh well, can you do another close up?" And it's just narcissism, isn't it?
It's like,
Like you talked to Bill. Like I really would like you to put this on the record. Like, does Bill think it's unfair that I'm targeting him about this fraudulent act?
yes. He thinks, he should be going after Walter or other people, like what Steve Wiebe did and is continuing to do is far worse than anything Bill Mitchell has done.
At first I had to find out who Dwayne Richard really was. Was he actually an incredible source? Or was he just some crazy video game fanatic?
We are brothers, and we go all the way back to the beginning. He, me, and Billy. Okay. Let's always keep it that way, okay? We just have to work and keep it that way.
I'm actually considered one of the best classic video game players of all time. I used to play back in the 80s when I was a kid. I've been in the Guinness Book of World Records. I've won the World Championships in '86.
I first heard about Twin Galaxies back in, I guess it would be when that Life magazine shoot came out, so I guess that was '82. And what happened was I started playing Pac-Man. That was the first game I ever learned how to play. There was a game called Tutankhamun that was in the list of games with the players and their achievements, and I had to score higher on Tutankhamun here in Grand Prairie than what was in the Life magazine shoot, eh? And so I was kind of excited, and that's what ended up happening was later on I finally realized that this was Twin Galaxies that was behind the record keeping, and eventually I was able to get in contact with them on the phone. I had to ride the bus like freaking 60 hours to get there. I didn't really have that much money, and it was a pretty cool contest, and I ended up finishing 13th, I think, on that, and that was not too bad, all things considered. And the most interesting thing about that is that when Entertainment Tonight was there doing the promotion for the contest, they ended wrap up about who won and who lost. They ended up interviewing me, and I ended up being on Entertainment Tonight.
I play about maybe 12 hours a week. It's about 6 hours on Saturday and Friday.
So I was like I was riding the bus back home, and by the time I got home, and all my friends from high school were like, they were watching Entertainment Tonight. So, oh, we saw you on Entertainment Tonight. Oh, we saw you on Entertainment Tonight. And I thought that was kind of cool. The Player of the Year contest came back up again in 1986, and a lot of players quit playing it, but at that time, go to Ottumwa, and it was sort of the contest was at Twin Galaxies, and everything was sort of collapsing or whatever. And at that time, Bill Mitchell, with helping Walter, they reopened up Twin Galaxies. Walter Day is back to reclaim Ottumwa's fame as the video game capital of the world. The Twin Galaxies video game arcade at 226 East Main has reopened, and Day, its former owner, is planning the 4th annual Video Game World Championships in Ottumwa for early January. The time has come. Twin Galaxies has been open for 2 weeks following 7 months of planning. It is now owned by Bill Mitchell of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The 1986 North American Video Game Challenge is scheduled from January 4th to 6th at Twin Galaxies. It has invited hundreds of players from several countries to face off on 12 different games. The winner will be submitted to the 1986 editions of the Guinness Book of World Records. Oh. It's a wide open contest, open to the public, he says, adding the contest is recognized by Guinness as the only competition which crowns an International Player of the Year. Day says he's only in charge of promotions now and making Twin Galaxies famous once again. They didn't really have any new games. They had a whole bunch of old classics, I guess you could say, we call, like, the contests, like we had Millipede, we had we had Defender, we had Turbo Miss Pac-Man, what else did we have? I think we had Berserk. Like, these are like games from 1982, 83, 81 or whatever. And it just, by that point, the reincarnation of Twin Galaxies, the arcade itself, it was just a shithole basically. And there was a lot of broken games that were in the back and wasn't really making any money. And like, we just squatted in the back of the arcade or whatever while we were there, and it wasn't actually all that great. And so there was only like 7 guys that actually competed in that contest at that time. No one from California wanted to come out. No one from Texas came out. Don never played. Steve never played. There were a few guys around, but they just never played because from those games, for the guys that were there, like everybody knew I was going to win right from the first day before they picked the games. And so I ended up winning the Player of the Year, and that was a high point. That was one of my goals. It was kind of too bad the way everything fell apart, though. They started having contests again, so I went to 2000 contest, Player of the Year, and I ended up finishing 3rd. It was all these new games, this home console stuff, and everyone was surprised, that I actually finished 3rd because I never had a chance to practice or play. I hadn't played really in a long time. And then 2001, 2002, they had again another official World Championships. I ended up winning those, and I established myself and shown myself to be a world-class player, and re-established my dominance as the best player.
Tell people, if for some cosmic reason, unknown reason, you needed to find somebody to play a video game for you, the person you would ask is Dwayne Richard.
Oh.
You actually have the notoriety of being the world record holder of the largest single privately awarded cash prize offered to a world's record in a classic arcade video game. I ought to know because I'm the one that gave it to you. You have won record performances and bounties from Bill Mitchell as well. You've won prizes from the annual Fun Spot competitions, and probably you've also won stuff back in the day. Walter Day. And then back in the day when you were gaming. No one else can make that claim. Not as far as classic arcade video gaming goes.
At the same time, Walter goes out of his way to make sure nobody knows anything about me. Like Walter used to call me the Great One. And that's in reference to, like Wayne Gretzky was called the Great One. Actually, I like this. This is from an article a while back. You could talk for hours with the Grand Prairie's Dwayne Richard, never realized he's spoken of, in some circles, was hushed tones revered for a Wayne Gretzky or a Michael Jordan. One of the most significant things was the compliment I got from Steve Harris, who is actually, when I was a kid, is actually my hero. And Walter and Bill really never knew how good I was, but Steve Harris did. But here's a quote from Steve. He said, "Some enthusiasts believe Richard is the best in the world." Harris said, "Richard can achieve mastery quickly at just about any game." And to me, that was actually one of the greatest compliments I ever received, and that mutual respect from my peers is actually one thing that I actually am most proud about. And so it came down around 2007. they are having a Pac-Man World Championship contest, and this is how this whole thing got started, where I actually had to win Cam to get a free trip to go to New York City to be able to start filming and interviewing everybody.
Finding out Dwayne was quite the credible source, I then had to go on and ask the next question. What does it even mean to get a perfect Pac-Man?
What it means to get a perfect Pac-Man is actually getting the highest score possible on Pac-Man. And what that involves is getting all the points, which is all the dots, all the power pellets that turn them blue, getting all the blue monsters, getting all the prizes, and you've got to play till the end of the game. And most people don't know the end of the game is screen 256. And you have to get there on your first man to be able to get the maximum amount of points. And on the split screen, as we call it, at the end of the game, there's actually 9 dots that are on the rainbow colored side, or the binary side of the board, and when you die, those dots regenerate, so it gives you an extra 90 points for each man. So the perfect game is playing 5 men plus 1 free man at 10,000, getting all the possible points from screen 1, which is the cherry, all the way to the split screen, which is board 256.
I haven't seen anything that says that you can, and knowing the way that the hardware and the technology was built then, you probably can't, because you're getting into essential garbage at that point in time. The game doesn't know what to do. And so if the game doesn't know what to do, how can you as a player, succeed or get past it?
Yeah.
A lot of these games here, there's, memory limitations, magical numbers, if you will, dealing with bits and bytes that the programmers at the time never thought it was conceivable that someone would get 256 extra men or get past 256 levels or something. It wasn't something thought of when the games were made.
So, is there technically any way to get past this split screen?
Well, that's actually one of the crazy things. Like back in the 80s, people are trying to claim they could get by. There's urban legends where people said they could, but they actually couldn't. And other people are claiming higher scores. It was simply just that they added more than one coin, games together to get a higher score. But there's no way to get past the split screen, and except using Rack Advance, and that's why we know there's a maximum possible score of 3,333,360 points. Well, I'm going to set up the Rack Advance. And what that allows you to do is to be able to go through the boards without actually having to play them. And that's the only way that we know that you can get by the split screen. Switch position 7 from off to on. That's what turns Rack Advance on. Hit the start. So technically that's actually what these boards are. You complete one rack of dots, and then it goes to the next board, complete eating all the dots, it goes to the next board, and next rack, next rack, next rack. And what this option allows you to do is to be able to go through all the boards without having to be able to play them. See, now you see what happened. The game's going back through all the beginning levels like it would at the beginning of the game, but it's actually playing at the 9th key speed.
So, how many people are there that have been able to do it without, like, the perfect game, without doing Rack Advance or any kind of tampering?
Oh, well, there's actually, there's 5 guys now that have done it, and there's more that actually can do it, but my friend Bill Mitchell was the first guy who was recognized for being able to do it. There's a gentleman named Rick Fothergill, which is a Canadian. He's a good player. He's a friend of mine. Chris Ira was the 3rd person that we know of that did it. He's a friend that I've known for 25 years or more. And then Tim Balderramos from Minnesota and Donald Hayes from New Hampshire.
I just say right now there's 6 people that I know of that have actually done it. I was the 6th one out of those 6. A lot of it was just a matter of having the desire to go for it, because I had seen people out there. Rick Carter for one, who has the techniques and the ability to do it, but he says, I just don't care. So I sat down, I said, that's one of the things I wanted to do. After I had done a bunch of other records, like, the Frogger, Super Zaxxon, all these other things, I said, it'd be nice to have a perfect Pac-Man. I want to see how hard it is, and, that'd be a nice accomplishment, because a few years ago when I did it, that was considered one of the holy grail accomplishments, and it took me probably a year on and off of learning grouping techniques, learning, getting a good pattern, sitting down and actually doing it, and sitting down and actually doing it. when I actually had the knowledge to do it, it probably took me a couple months to actually sit down and physically do it and actually accomplish it. And I made a couple of attempts up at Fun Spot. One of them's on King of Kong, or the end of one of them is on King of Kong, a very famous scene. So, I mean, that's, in a sense, yes, it's hard to do. It's definitely not easy, but it's not the hardest thing I've done.
There was a lot of other great gamers out there that mastered so many different titles. But as far as me, you always hear about jack of all trades, master of none. Well, I was a master of one, Pac-Man. Finally, after meeting greats like Billy Mitchell, Dwayne Richard, and the like, I decided, okay, maybe I need to push a little bit higher as far as Pac-Man. At that time, we knew about the concept of a perfect game. I decided to go for it, first on the emulator. And then I got my own full-size arcade machine and went after the perfect on the arcade as well. I got that finally in 2004. And then I got the perfect on emulator as well. And to be, one of the best at one of the best games, it's you just look back on it, it's like, wow. It's like, you can't believe you're one of those guys.
So when he refers to being one of the best, what exactly does he mean by the best? Like, how do you classify who is the best if there's a fixed number of points?
When people are looking at the average player who plays Pac-Man, to be able to get that perfect game means you're definitely one of the best, if not the best. And then once more than one person was able to get the score of 3,333,360, they started looking at how fast you could do it. And originally in the 80s, people would group the ghosts, and it was a very slow, tedious way of doing it. It took hours to do it that way, where now they started making continuous forward motion patterns, and they've got the time down now to almost 3 hours and 33 minutes now, I think it is, which is really incredible.
So before anybody got this perfect Pac-Man, was there like a race to see who could get it first?
Well, originally, this really never became an issue here till in recent days, when I guess supposedly the first one was done by Bill Mitchell. There had been players that had the technology that could have done it, or other people that knew about it, and but it wasn't really that big of an issue till Bill Mitchell did it. And as an owner of Twin Galaxies and a player and a referee and Walter Day, they used that as an opportunity to promote their company and to promote Bill Mitchell and Walter Day himself as noted scorekeepers and official record keepers of video game high scores.
That Billy is a very positive, very good person. I mean, he can be cocky and stuff like that at times, because we know how wonderful he is. We know how incredibly positive he is and how good he is to people. And that's the Billy Mitchell that the people have to see based on the evidence that's brought out.
I said, maybe it was actually Knight Rider first. It runs all over the world. I mean, I did interviews in newspapers, countries, languages I had never heard before. It was crazy. I'm driving down the road, my cell phone rings, I answer it, it's the BBC. Mr. Mitchell, you're on the air. So anyway, I said to him, I go, so I can understand you heard the story. I said, but so what? There's stories all over the place. It's a big story. How did you know it was true? How'd you know? I mean, you decided to call me. You had to have wanted to know if it was true before you called me. Yes. He says, we call Namco USA. He said, we asked Namco, can we trust Mr. Walter Day? They said, Walter Day only speak truth. I says, truth? He says, yes, truth.
It was unbelievable, says Gary Vincent, Fun Spot operations manager. Mitchell purposefully arrived on July 1st, Canada Day, and he won the title in time for the 4th of July. He even wore a red, white, and blue, a star-spangled banner tie to emphasize the patriotic sentiments behind his efforts. Mitchell, who refused to eat until he beat the Canadians for the world record, went hungry for nearly 2 full days. I had to be the first, Mitchell explains. It was like Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. No matter how many people accomplish the feat afterwards, it will always be Armstrong who will be remembered for doing it first. And best of all, it was an American.
So then after he got the record for doing it first, did they just record everyone else on the list by date, or how did it go?
Well, what happened was, Bill Mitchell did it on July 3rd, 1999, and so he was claiming to be the first one to do it. He got all kinds of media attention, and then as other players started doing it, they started keeping track of time right originally when it was first done. And Bill Mitchell's time in the Guinness Book is 5 hours and 30 minutes. And that actually is the longest time out of all the players. And then Rick Fothergill did it in 3 hours and 45 minutes, I think it was. And then Chris Ira did it, and they kept his time. And and then Tim Balderramos and Donald Hayes. And so when they're listed in the Guinness Book, they have the player, the date, and the time that it took them to do it. And it's all the same high score, 3,333,360 points.
Dwayne needed to do a little bit more research before he can even start the documentary. So the next step is really what sparked the whole thing, where he found out a lot of the big pieces of this puzzle. So he went in 2007 to the World Pac-Man Championships in New York. And this is where the story got interesting.
Microsoft points for you as well, my friend, to enjoy. Thank you so very much. Representing Canada, who will be recognized and crowned as third place in this competition. Any words for our friends back in Canada?
I'd just like to say, man, you got to get this game. It's great. My friends Neil and Rick are perfect Pac-Man guys in Canada. It's for you. I don't know if we're getting older and fatter and stuff, but it's good to see Pac-Man is alive. I'm really impressed with this game, and I just say I'm so glad to be here, and I'm glad to compete against everybody. This is I hope this is only the beginning of things for Xbox Live. So there was a big promotional thing done by Xbox Live and Namco with Pac-Man and Quizno Subs. They had a big contest online, and they were taking different winners from different regions of the Xbox Live network.
So we have probably one of the most famous people in this entire room here is Billy Mitchell, who, I don't know if you know, but in 1999, Billy Mitchell went to Japan and received some very special honors. And he was, this was even from a world record book from the Twin Galaxies folks. He was named the Video Gamer of the Century. Also, MTV recently named him one of the top 10 most important video gamers.
There was one winner for Canada that was going to get a free trip to New York City if they qualified, and I played, and I actually ended up winning Canada, so I got a free trip. My friend Tim Balderramos from Minnesota qualified, and he got a free trip, and Bill went there too, and so we were all there playing, and everything was going good. I actually, one of the storylines that most people don't realize is that the way that the contests work, we played original Pac-Man, but then they totally unveiled this brand new Pac-Man World Championship Edition, and that's what caught everybody off guard. And so we're all learning how to play this game at the same time, and it went through a round robin competition or a tournament style competition where out of all the 10 players that were there, 2 people would be eliminated with the lowest combined scores on down to the finalists. And I ended up getting third, and but I ended up hurting my finger at the end of the contest.
My finger, man. That's why I lost. Is that like are you going to be put on injured reserve list? That's what I'm saying. I was asking the players if can to give us more funding so we can have medical attention, psychics, and motivational coaches.
So if it wouldn't have hurt my finger, I should have finished at least second, if not won it. And I was kind of disappointed about that, but it was just a great trip. Got a chance to meet some neat people, and it was just a great experience for myself, and I was proud to represent Canada and finish third.
So it's funny, in this competition, Billy Mitchell didn't even do good in it, and he already had the award for the perfect Pac-Man. The funny thing is that Dwayne actually beat both Tim Balderramos and Billy Mitchell, 2 men who have already accomplished the first perfect Pac-Man by this time. This added to the mystery and really caused Dwayne to dig a lot deeper into this controversy. Who really was the most skilled Pac-Man player out there? So the question I had to ask next was, well, who's the fastest?
So then, who has the fastest perfect Pac-Man?
Well, right now, Rick Fothergill has the fastest perfect Pac-Man, but there's another guy that I haven't mentioned that's not in the Guinness yet, David Race. He actually is challenging for the fastest perfect Pac-Man, but the best Pac-Man players for speed are definitely Rick Fothergill and this new guy named David Race.
So if there's actually timing on all, now it's become a technical thing where you need to be timed and all this, is there a referee or someone who oversees all this? To get into the Guinness records, you would have to have some kind of verification like that, so.
Well, Twin Galaxies has been keeping world records. Originally they were called Twin Galaxies International Scoreboard back in the 80s, and when they became reincarnated here in 97, Walter and Bill changed the name to Twin Galaxy Intergalactic Scoreboard, and they set up a website, and so they started contacting the old players that kept track of scores, and a lot of us had validated world records over the years, and because we knew all the players and we were at the contest, and you know, Bill and Walter were involved in a contest at the Fun Spot in July, or actually in May. Bill and Walter were involved in a contest at the Fun Spot in May, where Rick and Bill Mitchell first started playing, and that's when they first started keeping world records again, you know, in an official capacity and having a tournament site. And so Walter was basically the main referee, or what we call the chief referee, and there were other people that were validating scores at the contest and other locations after that moment.
So the refs, are they volunteered? Do they get paid? Like, how does that work?
Well, we've always been hobbyists and love of the hobby, love playing video games, and no one really made any money at this stuff. We just did it because we enjoyed it. We did it because we wanted to pursue excellence in playing video games, and you know, we had to have some kind of rules and to establish what was a legitimate score, and we just sort of did it based on character, honesty, and integrity.
All right. So you mentioned one of the more famous refs, Walter Day. Even in his position, I know he's always been like the head figure for Twin Galaxies and stuff. Even him, was his work all volunteer, or was he getting paid at all? Like, how did that work?
Well, Walter tried, you know, and failed at running an arcade back in the 80s. It didn't work, and so he ended up using his promotion skills to even the Guinness contest itself. When it was at different locations, it was other people's arcades that had the games. He would set up referees at different locations, and he would be at one location, and that's how they started tracking the scores. And you know, when he reincarnated Twin Galaxies Intergalactic Scoreboard, he never had an arcade, so he had to have other people's games and other people's locations in arcades. So he never really made any money at it, never really been successful at it. And what ended up happening was Bill first bought Twin Galaxies back in 1985, in December of 1985, and he was an owner, and it ended up closing by the end of '86. And nothing happened for 15 years, I guess, or 12 years, and they reincarnated back in 1997 when the internet started and MAME started keeping track of classic gaming world records. And so Walter and Bill were co-owners of Twin Galaxies, and Bill financed Walter an awful lot. You know, and it wasn't so much that Walter's love of the hobby, so to speak, as the fact that if Bill didn't give him the money, nothing would have ever been done.
So you're saying Billy Mitchell funds Twin Galaxies then?
Well, at that time, you know, at this point in time in 2012, there's a different owner, and people don't know the rest of the story, though. There's been many owners and many people that helped trying to keep Twin Galaxies going and finance it. But Bill, right from the early 80s, had always given Walter money, and in many ways Walter treated Bill more special than any other player, and I didn't realize in many ways the way Walter gave Bill special favors and, you know, in many ways bent the rules for him. Twin Galaxies actually shut down, you know, many times. It was morphed into many things. Twin Galaxies in 1986 never made it through the summer. It actually got sold or shut down, and it was through a lawsuit that Bill and Walter as owners tried to sue some other players, Steve Harris and Jeff Peters, and what ended up happening was they wanted to get $1,500 apiece from the players in order to publish scores in Guinness, like they were trying to extort money from us. And what eventually happened is Walter went off to go back to meditate, and the thing was sold for $1,000.
And we ended up buying the rights to Twin Galaxies and everything that went along with it, including all the high scoreboard, from Walter Day for about $1,000. And I heard that Bill Mitchell actually, you know, gave Walter a lot of money in exchange for, you know, majority ownership in Twin Galaxies.
2 days ago, and Billy's the most distinguished person in the book because he's the only person to have a full page that recognizes his status as the video game player of the century. He was crowned the video game player of the century at the Tokyo Game Show in 1999.
Billy's our hero in many ways because he's been such a good leader and charismatic person, and he's been so devoted to help people. So it's only fitting that society honor him for his incredibly good qualities. So
we asked Namco, can we trust Mr. Walter Day? They said, Walter Day only speak truth. I says, truth? He says, yes, truth.
Does Mr. Walter Day always speak the truth?
He doesn't know how to speak the truth.
So let me get this straight then. Walter Day, who was getting paid by Billy Mitchell, was he the one who verified Billy Mitchell's tape?
Well, that's actually an interesting story. I didn't realize what happened because I wasn't there at that first contest in 1999 at the Fun Spot. They called me. I was going to grad school in Vancouver, and I said I couldn't make it. But, you know, I didn't even realize anybody was trying to go for the Perfect Pac-Man.
I'm Rick Fothergill. I am from Whitby, Ontario. Well, I was always interested in Pac-Man from the early 80s. And then I realized that there was like a maximum score you could get. We went to a tournament in 1999, the first annual Fun Spot tournament. And at that tournament, Bill Mitchell was there, and he decided he wanted to go for the perfect score as well. And the original settings of the game were 3 men and 1 free man at 10,000, and because you can do dip switches and set it for 5 men, they decided to make the settings for 5 men so no one in the future can ever claim they had a higher score. And the perfect score became 3,333,360. Me, stupidly, I went and said to Bill and Chris, I'm going to go for the perfect Pac-Man score at that tournament. Because it's never been done. No, I shouldn't have said that. I should have just kept the lid on.
Yeah, that was the problem.
Oh my gosh. Because you know what we were planning on doing? I was going to do it and Neil was going to do it.
And that's
Two
not,
Canadians, just
and
like that.
And that's not what happened, though.
No, that's not what happened. So as soon as we show up there, the first day of the tournament, there's Bill Mitchell sitting at the Pac-Man machine.
He wasn't even supposed to show up.
Rick and Billy, you know, they were alternating back and forth on the Pac-Man machine, and they were both, I'd say, within striking distance of getting the perfect Pac-Man. Each of them knew that the other could do it, and I think what was happening was they were basically running out of time. That I believe the first year was just a 3-day event, and here we are on day 3, and Billy had his chance, and he wasn't able to pull it off, and Rick was there on the machine, you know, having a great game, and the crowd's just getting huge. I mean, there must have been like 30 people surrounding him, cheering him on, and you know, right at the end there, he gets to the kill screen.
I get 3,333,270, which is 9 dots short of perfection because I lost a man shy of the kill screen.
You got all the blue time kills, but you died somewhere along the way in a knife key pattern.
2.5 million points, I died. And then you lose the 90 points because you don't kill yourself at the end.
To get the extra points.
Right. So, okay, the tournament ends like 3 days. It was a 3-day tournament the first time.
Yeah.
And then we all make an agreement that we will wait until our next meeting.
You, Chris, and Bill, yeah.
No, not, well, Chris too, he was like down in Florida, but Neil was there.
Yeah.
Right. That we will wait until our next meeting to go for the perfect score again.
Okay, well, what I saw, and this was right after Rick Fothergill had completed his almost perfect Pac-Man, that there was a gentleman's agreement, a handshake, if you will, between Rick and Billy Mitchell, and the agreement went that no one was to play that game, Pac-Man, for at least a year. Now, it wasn't clear when the next Fun Spot event would be, because, as I recall, I think the first Fun Spot tournament was in May of 1999, and they wanted to push it out because some of the college kids weren't able to attend, so they decided to make it the weekend before Memorial Day weekend, starting with Fun Spot 2. But in any event, the two of them definitely had an agreement that said neither one is to play the game either privately or in a public venue and break the world record and get a perfect Pac-Man. That they were both to wait until Fun Spot 2, date to be determined, and attempt any new world record at that point.
me, Bill Mitchell, Neil Chapman, Chris Era discussed it and decided that it would be best if we all went head to head again, being more exciting and give everyone like a fair chance of doing it. And Bill Mitchell agreed. We all agreed to do it. And then at the end of the tournament, on the third day, the last day, Walter Day was talking about who did what achievement and blah blah blah, and he then announced that we had an agreement that we were waiting until the next tournament in order to go for the perfect score on Pac-Man. And I thought, as well as Neil thought, that everything was kosher and we would practice and like go for it in perfect score the following year. But then Bill Mitchell did a sneak attack and went for it on July 3rd of 1999.
Next thing you know, it's July 4th weekend, and I happened to be in Weirs Beach that weekend, and I went over to Fun Spot, and this was actually a day later after all this happened, but it turns out Billy Mitchell had flown up there. I think he flew up on Wednesday night or Thursday. He was definitely there for a couple of days.
Yeah, he went there July 1st to 4th. He went there on Canada Day, of all things. Canada Day to Independence Day.
He made one attempt, I believe it was Thursday the 2nd, Thursday, July 2nd, 1999, and unfortunately for him, a kid walked behind the Pac-Man machine and unplugged his machine, and so he lost all his game in progress, which was, I don't know, 3 hours of work, let's say. So at that point, Billy called it a day and came back in on Friday.
He gets the perfect score on July 3rd, 1999.
It really makes me question the honesty and integrity of Billy by him kind of breaking that agreement that they had.
It didn't happen. Bill came back on his own, and it wasn't a contest or anything like that. And he managed to get the perfect game, but it sort of went back on a gentleman's agreement that I believe that they all had, and that was my understanding of what was discussed.
So Billy Mitchell should not have actually been the first person to achieve this award then.
He actually never did it under contest conditions. He didn't do it with a referee there. He did it as an owner of Twin Galaxies. He did it without scrutiny or validation. He did it without keeping the rules as far as time goes and how long he took. Ever hear about marathon rules where for every hour you played you were allowed to take 5 minutes but no more?
I've heard that from the Guinness rules. They've always said it's like that's their, I think that's their standard time for any marathon discipline, is you get a certain amount of time, you know, as you said, per hour that you can build up, and you can't really, it's not worth taking it. It's not worth taking the 5 minutes every hour or whatever. But most people I think you'd play for like 12 hours and you bank like, whatever that is. That's about an hour's worth, and then take the hour and then come back into it.
And when they put his time in, his time was recorded as 5 hours and 30 minutes exactly, which is ridiculous. That's a really impossible thing to do, to get exactly an even number like that. But the thing was, he took more than 5.5 hours. Walter submitted a bogus time for Bill's achievement, but nobody knew about that. And very shortly after that, Rick Fothergill did a perfect game at the Fun Spot, and they never really let anybody know about it until the year 2000, like 5 or 6 months later, and Bill ended up getting this award from Namco where they named him the Player of the Century. And Rick should have been able to go there. They should have been able to both share in the accolades, but because of their agenda and them wanting to gain their notoriety for themselves, they never let anybody know. And Bill went there to Japan, and he brought Walter over there to Japan to promote himself together and somehow establish their credibility, which really is illegitimate.
Rick and Chris did it no problem right after Bill did it. But the way Walter played it is that he never gave them any recognition because it would have downplayed Bill's recognition, and then Walter wouldn't be able to use Bill to promote himself and promote Twin Galaxies. No. Yeah, you did on July 31st, 1990, and you didn't get
January 9th of 2000.
Yeah,
so that's what 5 months later.
You know, and that's the thing, like that to me was like, I thought that was a real ignorant thing for both of them to do, totally manipulative. I didn't know what happened until I talked to Rick here recently about that. I thought, well, that'd make an interesting story for people to know.
Bill Mitchell gives Bill Mitchell the thumbs up, but nobody else does.
So the one thing I never noticed until I actually started looking at it, I'm sure no one else noticed this either, that in Walter's last book, they mentioned all the Perfect Pac-Man players, and they mentioned it in their write-up that they got a Perfect Pac-Man. Rick Fothergill is the only guy they never mentioned that he got a Perfect Pac-Man. And as well, even at the Mall of America event, when they're promoting Rick, and Bill's there at the same time, they never mentioned that Rick was a Perfect Pac-Man player. Like, they did everything they could to make sure Rick never really got any attention, so no one could ask him any questions. And the other thing about Rick's story is that everyone else that gave press releases for their Perfect Pac-Man accomplishments, they never gave Rick a press release to announce his Perfect Pac-Man because they didn't want any journalists asking him any questions.
This is how Bill Mitchell and Walter Day controls the media. They can and will selectively lock out information from the public that will go against an agenda that they have for drumming up publicity for TG. In this particular case, if Rick Fothergill publicly did the first million on Pac-Man, in hindsight, I don't think the media would have made such a big deal about it. But Bill Mitchell was portrayed in the media as one of the superstars from the 80s, a known gamer. Rick Fothergill wasn't known in the 80s. Chris Ira was, but I have a feeling that Walter, because of Bill's prominence and because Bill funds Twin Galaxies, Walter wanted Bill Mitchell to be the first Perfect Pac-Man player. Bill Mitchell orchestrated, which is the perfect word for this, the fact that he pulled it off at Fun Spot by denying the people that he swore he would go head-to-head with them against, by denying them a chance to do it with them. He jumped the gun, he took the glory, and Bill Mitchell has profited from it, both financially and in terms of public prominence ever since.
The hotel in Japan was $600 a night. $600 a night. And so he wasn't going to pay for his own room. My room had a double bed, so he stayed in mine. Well, I went down and I was meeting the Japanese friends, and they were telling me the venue and the structure for the day. And then Walter came walking, and we had just been talking about Walter.
Bill didn't let Namco know that he actually funded most of Walter's work, and the two worked together in collusion all the time. On top of that, he didn't even let Namco know that Rick Fothergill already also achieved a Perfect Pac-Man just a month after Billy. So Dwayne and Billy Mitchell used to be really close friends. This next interview is from when the two of them were in New York together for the Pac-Man World Championships. And it's really interesting because at this point, Dwayne doesn't know any of the dirty things Billy has done. So they have a conversation on how you need to do your performances public and live in order for it to be official.
If you're a world-class player, you have no problem duplicating a previous performance, and you find half the time when you get that level where you can duplicate that previous performance, you find you might even get a higher score next time. And it's not a burden or a problem, because you enjoy playing the game, and you enjoy showing what you can do. And so, like, the problem with all this stuff is, what are you willing to do to be able to get a high score? For us, like, it's not a big deal. For some people, you know, and especially, you know, since now, like, they want to get their name in Guinness or whatever the reason is, and with this documentary stuff, you know.
We have the actual tape from when he did his perfect game. You can see how Billy is delusional, saying it's so intense and hyping it all up, but really no one is there, and he goes against his own morals by playing privately.
And then to make it a national issue, and like, because every time you read those articles where he talks about you dressed up as Captain Canada or whatever like that, it was never at that point till he made it an issue. And it's like he's competing for the U.S. against nobody. It's like, what is that? It's like, oh, good job, Bill, you beat yourself, did you?
This article was written on the 10th year anniversary of the first Perfect Pac-Man, quote unquote, according to Twin Galaxies' Walter and Bill. And Bill called Rick up at this time, and he calls him up and says, guess what day it is? And he goes, oh, it's the 10th anniversary of me landing on the moon, or me getting the first perfect Pac-Man. I thought, what an asshole! Who the hell calls a guy up like that? Like, it's like some juvenile in high school, a bully calling a kid up after 10 years. You still remember how I screwed you? You remember how I used to tease you? Remember how I used to bully you? It's like, what an asshole! And then at the same time, he has in 2000, him and Chris Ira were there, and no one talked about what actually happened, and I didn't know what happened. They had a machine, or on the Pac-Man machine, they had this joke about the 9 dots, that Rick missed the 9 dots, and in this Wired article, they're talking about how Bill's claiming that he played somebody head-to-head, so he outright lied. And again, like, they've been making up this story and they've been ignoring the facts, and no one knows enough to check on it. I didn't know until I found this stuff out. I thought it's just ridiculous. And another thing, Bill is so bizarre. He used to put his son on the phone when he was talking to Rick, and he would get his son to make jokes about Rick missing the 9 dots. I thought, what a fucking asshole.
Looking at the situation, if Rick and Neil both knew that Billy and Walter were in this together and had a very corrupt system, they would not have made the handshake agreement. The very next game of Pac-Man Rick played, he achieved the perfect game. If there was no agreement, Rick easily would have acquired a perfect Pac-Man way before Billy Mitchell. So, even though Billy Mitchell technically morally went behind everyone's back and he shouldn't have even got the first perfect Pac-Man, but he did. So technically, was he the first one to do it?
Well, technically, he actually, what he did was he went and broke that agreement, but then we found out that there was another player from Florida, a guy named Bill Baspo, that actually did a perfect game 12, 11 years before Bill did. And the thing was, at that time, I didn't know much about Bill Baspo. I didn't really know about his skills and the fact that Bill knew about him, Walter Day knew about him, Chris Ira knew about him.
On the computer, on the internet, I came across Bill Bastable. There was a few references to Bill Bastable on Usenet. Now it's not Usenet anymore. Now they call it Google Groups. So if anybody wanted to find out about Bill Bastable, they could log on to Google Groups, and those messages are still there. But I believe these messages were dated from 1991, and Bill Bill wasn't posting himself. There was a reporter, an ABC affiliate, who was talking about Bill, and they were talking about a score of 915,000 on Miss Pac-Man, but perhaps more significantly, Bill Bastable was claiming that he got a perfect game back in the late 1980s, I believe, and there was some evidence to suggest that he did that.
Okay, so like, this is why I think Bill Bastable did it. And Bill Bastable, by the way, is not even saying that he wants to be officially recognized. He's saying just unofficially, you guys know, I did it. And okay, so here's a photograph, and all the information was correct when I looked at it. And one of the things 'cause I was very skeptical, and I told Dwayne here, I said, I want you to look at the high score on the photograph. And then you told me 999, 910. And I said, okay, that checks out. If that had been less, 999, 500 or something, I would have said bullshit right away. Because there's just a mathematic thing that happens, and if you're in a perfect score run, that the high score has to end up being at least 999, 700. And depending on the pattern you're using, it's actually could be 999, 990, 990, which it was in my game.
All this stuff took place in the 80s. I mean, there wasn't, and there's no doubt in my mind that he did all this. I mean, he showed me the pictures of. I saw him in person a number of times. I mean, he was just absolutely awesome. I mean, I can't imagine anybody being any better at those video games, especially in the mid-'80s primarily, and through the end of the decade.
So yeah, that checked out, and then I looked, and all the dots are gone, and like, this is why, like, the thing with Chris Ayra is important. Like, Chris Ayra knew about the 9 dots. Chris Ayra went to meet Bill Bastable. Bill Bastable claims that he got the information from Chris Ayra. Is it plausible? Yes, because Chris likes to, like, be able to say, like, I know more than you, right? And so, and then, like, okay, I see the diagram. There's a reporter involved. He has a date. He has a file folder, and he puts this information from Bill Bastable in. So, like, now you have the diagram, you have the picture, you have the information that we already know. Like, Bill Bastable knows what he's doing. Like, and then there's something with the picture roll, right? That had a date on it, like.
Yeah, there's a timestamp date on the back of the photograph that the journalist has had since 1988. And that the thing I found out is that he did get a perfect game before Bill. Bill knew about it, and he actually talked to Bill Bastable about it, and Bill sent a picture to show that he got 3,333,360 to Chris Ayra in 1999, and they just totally ignored his story and totally covered up his achievement, and so they screwed Rick Fothergill, the Canadian. They also screwed Bill Bastable, another Floridian who was a great player. Todd, what do you see there on the picture of the that he's holding?
Perfect Pac-Man with the split screen and the perfect score of 3,333,360.
Congratulations, Mr. Bill Bastable.
Thank you.
No formulas about the perfect Pac-Man, and to Bill Mitchell's assumption is that he didn't think that Bill Bastable had the perfect Pac-Man and the dot factor and everything else that was involved. But after going to Bill Bastable's house and seeing a photo that was in a series of photos that was from the 80s, it just it sort of corroborates that maybe possibly, to my best looking into things, that Bill Bastable possibly might be having the perfect Pac-Man.
They're pretty good liars and pretty good backstabbers, but I haven't seen them actually do anything to.
Well, one of the things about, I mean, at one time Chris had the perfect Pac-Man. I had the fastest perfect Pac-Man, and at one time, I'm not a ref anymore. I used to be a ref for Twin Galaxies, but I saw Chris's tape for the tape that he submitted for the fastest perfect Pac-Man, and it was not. To my knowledge, as a referee, what you're supposed to look for and what you're supposed to do, it wasn't a perfect tape. There was all the 1 second boards were blipped out, and when he got to the 9th key, his 9th key pattern, it stopped at the 9th key and then it started again at the split screen. So, I mean, that wasn't a legitimate tape. It never should have been accepted. It never should have been.
Well, and the funny thing is, who actually validated that tape? Bill isn't supposed to be referee, but he called Walter at 2 in the morning and told him he holds up the stopwatch, and that's accepted as the record?
I sent an email to the higher ups in Twin Galaxies and told them that I wanted to talk to them about the tape because I saw the tape, and I said that it shouldn't have been accepted, but I never got a reply.
So Billy Mitchell and Chris Ayra were both really close friends then?
Well, Chris Ayra actually was always a better Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man player than Bill Mitchell. Most people don't know that, but for some reason, Bill always seemed to get the top billing, and his Guinness score for Pac-Man that he was claiming as being, something of note was only a 2.4 million score. And there were hundreds, if not thousands of people that could actually beat that score. All you'd have to do is be able to get a kill screen. You'd automatically be able to beat it, never mind a perfect game. And there were hundreds, if not thousands of people that could do that back in the early 80s. And Chris Ayra himself was able to get all the blue time ghosts in as early as 1984 when they started keeping track of Guinness scores and stuff like that. So, for some reason their friendship maintained its equilibrium as long as Chris Ayra was always number 2 and Bill was always number 1. So you can see there's a definite tie there together.
Superior player in Pac-Man than Bill Mitchell is. He's always been a better player. And what do you have to say about that, Chris?
I'm not going to comment on that because, Bill might say something about it.
Well, we know the truth, don't we, or do we?
Well,
So when did you find out about Bill Bastable? Did anybody like Walter Day or Billy Mitchell, did they know about him before? Like, why, if he's such an incredible player, why wasn't he on the scene earlier than this? Like, how come no one knew?
So in the 1985 Player of the Year contest, there was opportunities for invitation to become part of a professional video game league, and Bill Bastable's name was on the listings on the back, so obviously they knew about him. Chris Ira actually, through the help of Darren Harris, they actually tracked Bill Bastable down and found out that he was in Sarasota, Florida. So on November 4th, 1986, Chris Ira rode up to Sarasota and met Bill Bastable and played him, and came to realize that he was a legitimate player. Well, that's actually a really interesting story. I found out that they knew about Bill Bastable as early as 1983. He sent in a score of 881,000 on Miss Pac-Man. That was the world record on Miss Pac-Man, and they actually just ignored him because it wasn't a score that they themselves could achieve, and Walter gave an authority over to Bill and Chris to validate Miss Pac-Man's scores because there's been a number of bogus scores submitted, but Bill Bastable was a legitimate player. And so here you see all these pieces falling in line where Bill Bastable sent in a score, they invalidated and said, oh, you know, you're a hoax or whatever. He sent him a photograph and he couldn't fake that photograph. That you could tell that when he took that photograph that he knew what he was doing, because when you get a kill screen on Miss Pac-Man, the game will give you extra boards, or sometimes it won't. It'll just reset itself. So he had already taken a picture of the screen upside down, which is the proper thing that happens when the game resets itself, and it clearly shows the score in the cabinet. That there's no way you could fake that score, but yet Bill and Chris, because of their insecurities and their agendas, they invalidated his score. And then you find out that Chris actually met him after they tracked him down, and they met in Sarasota, Florida in 1986, and he said he's an incredible player, and you know, Chris confirmed that he met him when I talked to him through email or corresponded with him. You can see the emails there where he actually says Bill's a great player, and when I did ask him about whether Bill Bastable had a perfect Pac-Man and knew anything, his answer was, well, where's his proof? And you know, so you can see this agenda where both Bill and Chris had marginalized Bill Bastable from early on, and so you can see why there might have been a hidden agenda to not only not give him credit for his Miss Pac-Man scores, but also they didn't want to give him credit for his Pac-Man scores because they didn't think or didn't want anybody to get the credit for being better than them.
So have you ever confronted Walter, ever talked to him or Billy about Bill Bastable, like if they actually knew him or what?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I actually, one of the last times I ever talked to Walter Day, I was, you know, physically in the same place with him, and I asked him about Bill Bastable, and I said, Walter, did you ever hear about a guy named Bill Bastable and him actually claiming he got a perfect Pac-Man score back in the 80s? And what happened was I first found out about Bill Bastable and his achievement that was noted on Usenet there on Google Groups from Mark Longridge, and Mark Longridge actually told Walter about it back in 1999, 2000 or whatever it was. And so Walter knew about this guy, but when I asked Walter about that, he said he didn't know anything. And then the other thing I found out was that not only did Bill Mitchell know about Bill Bastable, he actually talked to Bill Bastable on the telephone in 1999, 3 days after he got his perfect Pac-Man, because that's how Bill Bastable found out about these other players claiming to get a perfect Pac-Man. And Bill didn't have long distance, and so Bill had to call him when he corresponded to Chris Ira. And Chris Ira ended up getting a picture of his perfect Pac-Man photograph in the mail as early as a couple weeks there in July in 1999. So they knew about it, but they covered it up. And Chris confirmed that he had a photograph of Bill Bastable's perfect game, and they just totally ignored it. And regardless of whatever happened, there were no specific rules like they are now about exactly how you supposedly can claim to get a perfect Pac-Man. But because both Chris and Bill had already broken the rules, why they want to be so hard on Bill Bastable when he'd already shown himself to be a great player and he didn't know any better, to me is just crazy.
Well, what I thought it was originally was that as long as I got through the left half of Maze 256 and ate up all of it, was obvious that 3,332,820, I believe it is, used to be what I thought or I perceived as a perfect score in original Pac-Man. Then, well, as I was playing back then, or as I had met Chris Ayer and Bill Mitchell, it started to dawn on me that there was something else going on about the right half of Maze 256 where rainbow colored letters and numbers are, where you have 16 columns where you can move the muncher, and 32 rows other than these little walls. If somebody had a terrain map, they'd know where these are in particular within that particular arena. Now, I didn't know it at the time that each muncher was worth 90 points, and that if you had 5 men and a bonus at 10,000, that you could have 6 times that 90, which is 540 points, added into the 3,332,820 to give a grand total of 3,333,360. So once I got the game, I think it was either in 87 or 88, I don't remember exact dates on these things, I set about trying to rack test it up there and learn what it is that I didn't know about the right half of Maze 256 so that I could complete the job or complete the mission of actually getting a perfect game. And I did that by 1988.
Basically, it's because he didn't know what the rules were specifically, and technically there weren't really any rules at that point because he's breaking new ground, and because he was the first one to do it, there were no rules established other than the fact that there was a score of 3,332,360. Twin Galaxies wasn't in existence at that time, and so you know, you have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he could play and that he actually did do it.
No, Bill Mitchell is like trying to say like no one ever did it before, like in under any circumstance, tournament or not, and like I don't think that can be substantiated like this.
I think at this point the ball lies in Bill Mitchell's court to come forward and to divulge what exactly happened, and if he really feels himself the first person to get a perfect Pac-Man, he should defend that fact. All kidding aside, we're all gamers, let's be adult about it and set the record straight to say exactly how things happen. And if Bill Bastable got a first perfect Pac-Man, then Bill Mitchell should explain his reasons why he seems to agree that he's the first person to get a first perfect Pac-Man.
If we were to make a new list of the perfect Pac-Man players in order of date, we would have to go Bill Bastable, Rick Fothergill, Tim Balderramos, then Donald Hayes. We would have to recognize Chris Ira as unofficial because he has yet to prove his score as being, I guess, officially verified, because he still hasn't done that. He did not have a ref verify his score. So as for right now, I would see him as being unofficial. It's sad that Dwayne's friendship with Billy and Walter has to be this way. But I mean, looking at the facts, Billy covered up Bill Bastable's Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man scores. He broke the agreement between Rick, Neil, and Chris and went behind their backs and got the first perfect game. After that, he took all the credit for the accomplishment when he went to Japan. Both him and Rick could have went because by that time, Rick had his perfect game as well. But instead, Billy and Walter didn't even mention to Namco that others had done the same achievement. I think in time all this could have been forgiven, but the problem is that both Billy Mitchell and Walter Day will not admit to any of this because it will ruin their reputation and take a chunk out of their pride. Dwayne didn't want all this to have to go this far. All he wanted was for Billy and Walter to tell the truth and own up to the corrupt system they have created. They stopped talking to Dwayne and would not fess up at all, so Dwayne had to get the truth out there. It's sad that someone could be stuck in such narcissism. I guess it shows how fame and money can corrupt someone. As for the question, is it all worth it? I'll leave that up to you to decide.
See, I don't even want to say in my opinion because it feels like it's stronger than that. Like,
what's it called?
in my mind, I guess I'll say it like that. In my mind, I had an agreement with Bill Mitchell. We had an agreement that we would not go for the perfect 5-man score until the next tournament.
The best roadmap, I think, for somebody being liked and respected is they have to walk the moral line. I mean, if they start lying, they start stealing, they've got a problem because they're going to lose friends. Other people who are in their peer group are going to walk away.
That's the thing, and Bill can't understand. He doesn't think he did anything wrong, because I didn't know about this.
No, he doesn't. He will stick to that, possibly to his dying breath. I don't know. That's what he says. I didn't sign a contract. I didn't do anything wrong. That's what he doesn't understand. It's okay, it's not a question of that, Bill. It's not a question of oh, can you get away with it? It's was it honorable? Was it moral? No. In my opinion, no.
Well, how do you feel about what Chris and Bill have done, not just to you, but to these other side stories? Do you have an opinion on that?
I'm not happy with it. Let's put it that way. I think that I should leave it at that point. I'm sure I could say a lot more about it.
Billy's story is unraveling little by little. His storybook achievement of the perfect Pac-Man, which he got a lot of media attention for, is showing some chinks in its ironclad aspects, such as Bill Bastable, the person who did the perfect before he did. He is basically trying to stop all the plugs from getting out, those that can expose what happened. Bill Mitchell had a plan, just as he says in the movie, to get the first perfect Pac-Man. He did so on the backs of two of his best friends, Chris Ira and Rick Fothergill. He did so against the accomplishments of a former player, Bill Bastable, who did it before him. And in working in concert with Walter Day, they basically pulled the wool over the media's eyes, and they promoted Bill to no ends, to the greatest extent that Twin Galaxies ever has for a player, and ignored Bill Bastable's accomplishment in the process. That's a shame.
What more do you want? You can only be young for so long. You got to get old. You got to move out of the way for your kids. You got to
deal with people that tell the truth. That's
I know that's Tim's heard me talk about that all the time. I can't stand people who lie. I don't deal with people who lie. I have enough stress in my life. No, I don't actually have any stress. The only stress that comes in my life is when I have to deal with people I don't know and I have to learn, do they tell the truth or do they lie? I don't deal with people who lie. If I have to, I will learn and I'll adapt, and I'll tell them right at the start. You get one chance. One chance. Life is too short. I can't fix your problems. I can't solve your problems. I can't even fix and solve my own problems. I don't have all the money in the world. So if you lie to me and you ask me this and that and the other thing, I'll help you once, but if I find out you're lying, I can't trust you, and I'm not going to waste my time because you don't even take your own life serious, because you won't even tell the truth and be honest. So I just move on, because I can't fix you and I can't solve all your problems. I can't even solve my own. So it's like when people who lie, it's just shit. You get all stressed out because you don't know if you can trust anything they say. It's like we were listening to Lenny, the lady who made
Lenny Riefenstahl.
Yeah, the lady who made the propaganda film. What was it called again?
Triumph of the Will.
The Triumph of the Will. She's the lady who was Hitler's propaganda minister. Or no, Goebbels was the propaganda minister. She made the greatest film, propaganda film ever in history. And the comments, when this guy was doing the research for the book, he says, all the people are saying, she only lies when she opens her mouth. And I just that's about all you can say about these guys.
Yeah, well, that's an old barroom talk. I know you're lying. How do you know I'm lying? Because your lips are moving.
yeah, that's true too. That's another way of putting it. That's pretty funny. No, I don't know how people can live like that. These guys must be, because you have to deny, you have to live in denial for a long time till the lie catches up. You have to remember all the fucking lies you told to keep the story straight.
You gotta tell more lies than cover.
And the stress and the stress and the stress, how do these guys sleep at night? They're gonna die young. heart attack, stress.
Apparently some of them sleep like babies.